Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Critical Moves. On today's episode, the three of us are going to cover the games of 2026. 2025, by all accounts, was an impressive year for releases coming out into the strategy genre. Unfortunately, though, across our reviews, community feedback, and the entire genre and player base of strategy games and their vocalizations, a lot of these games just didn't meet the quality standard we were expecting. We covered a lot of this in our episode on the games of 2025 as a retrospective, but even in that episode, we chalked up most of our favorite experiences of 2025 in strategy to DLCs and existing titles. We saw returns of major franchises like Civ and Europa Universalis. Unfortunately, just like Anno, a lot of these games seem to disappoint in the long run or are going to take some time before they get up to the standard that people were expecting at launch. But I'm your host, Jack, and today I'm joined by Al.
Hello, Jack. Are you good?
I am good, yes. And Sid.
Hey, Jack. How are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm good.
So, 2026, there's a lot to look forward to. We've got some pre-existing announcements. There's a lot of uncertainties, which of course we can't really do much but speculate and talk about. But we're here today to talk about the definite answers that we have for games that are projected to release next year. It's pretty exciting. Even at the end of 2025, we've had some major announcements from some big players in the genre, so I know we're still excited to talk about that. Al, I want to jump over to you. If you had to pick two games off the top of your head that you'd be excited to play in 2026 and that you're most looking forward to, what would those games be?
That's a very difficult question because there's so many titles which I've got my eye on. I think 2026, and I think we said this in 2024 that we were so looking forward to 2025 for releases, and then 2025 came along and it was all a bit crap. And I'm almost in the same situation now at the end of 2025, thinking, well, 2025 has been great, so what have we got to look forward to in 2026? The main game for me is one which I'm just hoping that it comes out in 2026. Does that still count? Can I still use that?
Yes.
Sanctuary Shattered Sun, and that should come as no surprise to people who have listened to this podcast. I'm the community manager for Sanctuary Shattered Sun, so this is an entirely biased perspective, but we're allowed to be biased. It's our podcast. If you don't like it, tough. Sanctuary Shattered Sun is a grand scale RTS set on a Dyson sphere in the future. It comes from the same lineage, the same DNA as the Supreme Commander games, which is Supreme Commander is probably my favorite ever RTS game. And when I saw, I think it was 2023 when I first got involved with this project, when I saw that they were making what Chris Taylor, the developer of Supreme Commander, called a spiritual successor to the games that they made at Gas Powered Games, I was blown away. I was like, this is all of my gaming dreams come true. So the first one for me is Sanctuary Shattered Sun. Have you seen much of it? Have you seen much about it?
Personally, Al, I've seen everything that you've chatted about from all your time on the dev team. I've heard nonstop talk about it. And I also have heard all of the comparisons. But yeah.
I'm really looking forward to it, really excited about it. Having seen you talk about it as well.
Yeah, and I think it does count as a game of 2026 because we are looking at between March and July 2026, we should see the Kickstarter campaign launch and the first public release of the demo. So the game will be playable in 2026, and I'm kind of hoping that it's going to go down the early access route. And I think we've said in the past about early access that we accept early access for indie developers, and I'm hoping that we have an early access release before the end of 2026. Yeah, I'm very excited for this game. It is just having played it. I've played it already. That's just one of the perks of being me. It is just there are no words. It's like what I remember when I first loaded up Supreme Commander in 2007 or whatever it was, and I was just blown away by the gargantuan scale of a video game. and this was exactly the same. From your tiny little tier 1 scouts all the way up to now they've gone up to Titans, tier 5 Titans, which can just decimate an entire base. They call them game enders because the idea is that if you build one of these, one way or the other, is going to end the game.
Just everything about this game fascinates me as a massive fan of Supreme Commander.
I know you've been asking for a key.
Yeah. Where is this key? Where is my key? You're
not having one.
Yeah, no, I said to you before, didn't I? I said I'll wait till it's done. I'll wait till then and then play it. Hopefully, if a demo comes out.
When the demo comes out.
Yeah.
They're still working on it, of course, because this is a game which is still in the pre-alpha stage. So there's still a lot of work going on with it. But the demo is playable. And if I'm going to be like a marketing shill here, if you want to play Christ, I almost call it Supreme Commander. If you want to play Sanctuary Shattered Sun, now you can join their Patreon. You can send a message on the Patreon page, and they'll give you a key to be able to play the game straight away. So it's already playable in 2025, but 2026 is going to be the absolute peak and key time for this game. But I am conscious that we have a lot of games to cover. And when we did the 2025 episode, we managed to cover 3 games in 45 minutes. So I'm conscious that we've got a lot to cover. So let's move on to the next one, shall we?
Well, what is your second game, Al?
Oh, she's staying with me. You're staying with me.
Yeah,
Okay.
I asked you 2 games.
Dawn of War 4.
Yes.
Honestly, Dawn of War 4, when they... And I remember I've been watching and waiting and plotting and scheming, and I thought that they're working on something, and I think it was maybe April sort of time this year, and I wrote about this on 40kgames.com. There was a LinkedIn photo appeared of the guy who's one of the financiers for Relic, went to Warhammer World in Nottingham, and of course the rumor mill just went through the roof. It just went off the rails. What's going on? Are Relic back? What are they going to be working on? And then they announced the definitive edition. I was like, okay, I'm really excited about the definitive edition. I said that Dawn of War Definitive Edition was my best game of 2025, and I stand by that. I think it's a fantastic game in 2004, and it's a fantastic game in 2025, and continues to be into 2026. I thought that was it. And then it was only about a month later that King Art Games and Games Workshop and Deep Silver announced they were making Dawn of War 4. And it was just like 2 brilliant pieces of news. I'm a 40k fanatic. 2 brilliant pieces of news coming out of what is, to me, one of the best examples of 40k video games, but also one of the best RTS games as well in the original Dawn of War. So they're making Dawn of War 4, and it's very, very exciting. Very exciting.
Honestly, I'm just so excited for Dawn of War 4 because they're promising to go back to the old the old roots basically. I've kind of watched the trailers and things like really sort of forensically in the past few weeks. I'm just really excited for this game to come out. Big fan of Dawn of War. And
they were very clear. King Art Games were very clear when they started talking about Dawn of War 4 that they're not ignoring the 2 sequels to Dawn of War, but they are focusing on the original Dawn of War in terms of we want to get back to that. We want to get back to that gameplay. And there's a lot of speculation that the reason why Relic didn't get to keep the Dawn of War license and make the 4th game is because of the issues around, in particular, Dawn of War 3. And of course, King Art have looked at that and said, well, nobody really liked Dawn of War 3. Dawn of War 2 was a huge departure from the original mechanics that made the first game great. So let's go back to what people want, which is that classic RTS gameplay. So it's yeah, I'm just keeping my fingers crossed because I want it to be great. And I know with that there comes this situation where I could end up bitterly disappointed if it isn't. You know, that kind of situation where maybe I maybe need to match my expectations and my reality, because my expectations are through the roof, and I just hope that the reality of it is also through the roof. But we shall see. But they've said it will be released in 2026.
But yeah, it will be awesome. I mean, if Warhammer 40k, Total War as well coming at some point, not sure when, but we could have two amazing, Warhammer 40k games on our hands, which is always really good. And having seen, obviously, the Warhammer franchise dipping that 10, 12 years ago, kind of dipping in popularity, and then now it's kind of rising back up as well. Loads of good made sort of games coming out. That franchise.
I don't think it's ever dipped.
Yeah, it was kind of not dipped as in totally obliterated, but kind of slightly weaned. I mean, once the Warhammer stuff, the Total War kind of rescued Warhammer in that sense, but yeah, it's just there's been lots of good stuff from the Warhammer universe recently.
So Al, have you gotten over your reservations for King Art doing Dawn of War 4?
My reservations were, and they remain. My reservations remain the same. That they released one moderate quality RTS in Iron Harvest, and there's a lot of things in Iron Harvest which you can see. Company of Heroes, which of course is a Relic game, in terms of the cover system and all this kind of stuff, you can see that they've leaned on Relic's work in making Iron Harvest. So my reservations are still there, but what I really, really appreciate about King Art Games is their transparency. They are releasing persistent updates. We'll get lots of information about it, and I think fair play to you, because you look at some games which we're excited for, and one which I think you're going to talk about at some point, Jack, where they said, "Hey, we're making this game," and this was in April 2025, and then we've heard nothing since. So, with King Art saying, "Hey, we're making this game," and then you're almost looking weekly. There's a new video comes out, or there's a new article comes out, or they're doing another interview. So I still have reservations, but they're not. I'm willing to give them some leeway and allow this thing to cook, and then to try it for myself.
I see. Well, that sounds pretty optimistic ultimately, and I think, just like Sid was saying, it's going to be a fantastic year for 40k or Warhammer in general. But I think that that's also just because, I mean, we've got the two games that have already been announced, Dawn of War and now Total War 40k, and who knows what other 100 different games they've licensed Warhammer out to already that have been in production, since they're so frivolent with that IP. So yeah, we'll see. And interestingly, I saw recently that while Henry Cavill he's got total creative control for the film and television and animation side of that IP for Amazon, he's already publicly stated he's not interested in learning how games are made or being involved with their process in any way, because it would ruin the magic for him as a player in his free time. So it seems like he's going to be largely hands-off with that IP in any capacity while it keeps getting handed out to other companies for their games. So that's an interesting position.
It is. I've been watching this Amazon Games Workshop, Henry Cavill, love triangle quite closely, because did you see the Secret, I think it was called Secret Level, the episode that they did featuring Titus, who's the Ultramarine from Space Marine and Space Marine 2. It was really, really well done, and I think that was maybe a bit of a litmus test to see how it was, to see how audience responded to it. And I think it was overwhelmingly very well received by people. And I am excited to see what they come up with for the 40K TV series. But we're here to talk about games, gentlemen. So let's move on.
All right. So that's done with Al at the moment. Sid, if you had to choose 2 games off the top of your head you were excited for in 2026, what would they be?
Well, keeping with that sci-fi theme, I'm taking everyone to space today, into the cosmos, because I have chosen 4 space-themed games. But the main one I'm really looking forward to is Falling Frontier, which has been sort of developed by Stutterfox Studios, published by Hooded Horse, and this is a real-time space RTS where logistics, supply lines, reconnaissance, intelligence, things like that are far more sort of encouraged, far more sort of important than just all-out sort of warfare. It has really cool sort of physics-based ship combat as well. Also, ships over time, they get this sort of grime on the hull, and over time, this build-up of dirt, which I'm not sure yet whether it's just going to be aesthetic or there's going to be some sort of gameplay mechanics in that. The universe, the star systems itself, will be procedurally generated, as with most space games these days. But things like ambushing the enemy, scouting, supply lines, they matter much more in this game than just sort of raw numbers in terms of what you see on the screen. And sort of every ship has a physical object with subsystems and crew, so you can really go minute. Just love the art style, the aesthetic, everything about it. I'm just really looking forward to. People were worried recently because they kind of went a bit off the radar for a while, and there was a weird sort of rumor going around, saying that they'd cancelled it or they'd abandoned the project. But in fact, a few weeks ago they came out with the latest sort of dev update, and they said no, we're completely still deep in development. We've in fact revamped combat systems. They've overhauled ship designs, and yeah, it's going to be. I'm really looking forward to that. It's going to have sort of more physically grounded battles as well, because it leans heavily into physics-based combat. So they've kind of revamped, ship interactions, projectile behavior, and subsystem damage, just making it more sort of realistic.
Sid, do you really think it's going to come out in 2026? That's going to be my first obvious question. And the reason I ask this, and I'm sure it's fair, it's a fair question. It was delayed in 2022. It was delayed in 2023. It was delayed in 2024. It's been delayed again in 2025. In fact, when you look at the Steam page, they announced a delay. In November 2023, they announced they were going to delay it until 2025. And then the next news update on their Steam page is the delay to 2026.
Yeah.
So, and I appreciate this is always a situation with indie games. They do not have the money to be able to push through development. So I get there's going to be delays, but this seems to be, are we on the cusp of development hell for Falling Frontier? It's a game that I'm really looking forward to as well. But this seems to be just delay after delay after delay. What's going on?
Yeah, as you say, 2003 just kept getting delayed. I think what they wanted originally is totally different to what it is now. So much more deeper systems built in. think that could explain the 1 to 2 year delay. For 23, 24, now 25.
And now 26.
And now 26, yeah. So I'm not I'm not optimistic that it will come out in 26. I'm hoping that we'll get some sort of demo for it, or some sort of thing to say, look, this is still being worked on. Check it out this year, hopefully 2026. But having seen the pattern, as you say, they could still delay it to 2027.
It's almost like you have this scope bloat where they say this is the game we're going to make, and I think originally it was quite arcadey, and now they've moved it to more simulation. And I appreciate they did a lot of work on changing the core mechanics, but it seems like if they're making changes and increasing the complexity of the game, and then giving people a release date, which they, I just think, are we ever going to see Falling Frontier get released?
I'll say, as a voice of diction here to jump in, the game is gorgeous, right? But it kind of looks like the initial CG trailer that played for Total War 40K, and then everybody was surprised that a gameplay trailer played immediately after. It was like the CG trailer where people were like, "This is so exciting," but this doesn't show anything about the game. Like, this game looks gorgeous. It looks fake, and that's just to say that I feel like it wouldn't be in development hell, but I think that from my experience, the reason it keeps getting delayed is because when you look at the work they're doing, if that's real and it isn't just a whole bunch of lies, which no offense to them, it's just it's impressive. Like, that's how doubtful I am because of how good it looks. So props to them. But if this is real, they clearly have a massive amount of talent on the team, and I think that there's a secondary, like there's an alternative path that some games take. Some games lack the talent, and then they have scope bloat, and then they stay in development hell because they're never achieving the things that they want to do, or they're constantly pushing the agenda for what they want to do. I think Falling Frontier is suffering from an excess of talent on the team, pulling off what they wanted, but that means that they're moving the bar out of like being overly ambitious, not because they're not achieving the work that they need to do fast enough, or maybe they made an absolutely gorgeous game, but they made a game that doesn't actually play well. And so what they're finding out is they're incredibly capable developers, but they're not incredibly capable business people, maybe. Like, they don't know how to manage a community, expectations. They didn't realize the project would take as much time as they want, but I digress. The game is gorgeous, as well as many of the others I think Sid is going to talk about today.
Yeah, we'll have to see. I mean, they did have a new artist join the team that did a full redesign of many of the ship models. So, we'll have to just wait and see. See what happens there. Excited for that one. But the next game, Fragile Existence, which may seem similar to Falling Frontier. It's also published by Hooded Horse. I mean, they're everywhere now on the Hooded Horse. But this is planned for 2026. Also, again, take this with a bit of pinch of salt. It's a hybrid RTS 4X with some survival strategy mechanics. You're kind of fleeing a destroyed Earth. That's the premise of the game. You are managing a refugee fleet. You establish colonies on planets. You're surviving an overwhelming sort of alien threat. So you have to manage that at the same time. So it's going to have, they're focusing on like a human-centric survival narrative. So they want to give you kind of a sense of desperation and rebuilding, as they sort of put it. And it's going to have like a mix of macro strategy and tons of hands-on fleet management, which I personally enjoy. It will have lots of modding tools. They've promised sort of, scenario editors. So the possibilities for scenarios could be endless, basically, with this game. I'm really looking forward to this one as well. Haven't heard much updates from the dev recently, but we'll have to wait and see what happens.
Are they trying to do too much?
It seems it seems that way, especially from a solo developer, Lee Harris. He's sort of based in the UK here in the UK. I'm not sure. I mean,
I just think the reason I asked that, Sid, is because it's combining RTS, 4X, and then this Battlestar Galactica style survival mode. And I'm thinking this is again. There's a lot of there's a lot going on there, and especially for I feel a bit crap for saying it because we on Critical Moves have always been massively supportive of indie games, and I'd love to see indie gamers succeed. I'd love to see indie devs realize their dreams and produce these games, because I think a lot of our disappointments from 2025 were these. It was the Annos, it was the Civilizations, it was the EUs. It was all these games where you've got these huge publishing houses behind them, and all of the games that we really enjoyed were from smaller studios. So I don't want to rag on indie devs, and especially solo devs, because this is one person putting their everything into a game, and I've seen it, and I think it looks great, and it looks like something that I'd certainly want to check out. But this is a lot. There's a lot going on there, and I keep my fingers crossed that they can make it work.
Yeah, I mean, in the latest diary, they've finalized the core city building mechanics, both planet side and in space. They're saying are now finalized. So I'm guessing the main major gameplay mechanics are near completion. But as you say, yes, there's a lot going on here. I'm not sure since the start of this development whether they've recruited any more members or not to work on this, but it seems to me like a very ambitious game, because not only you've got the space stuff, but then you've got the planet side stuff to deal with as well. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see on that one.
Is it going to be narrative driven? Is there a story involved in this?
Yes, it seems to be. It seems to be more narrative rather than the sort of sandbox style of Falling Frontier.
But at the same time, it's procedurally generated as well.
Yeah, so I'm not sure. I'm not sure how that's going to work with that, unless there's a core storyline. But obviously, once the universe is generated procedurally, then somehow in the systems of the game, it's going to be do you sort of wear off from that core story and make your own story, or do you it'd be interesting to see, I think.
Certainly want to watch. You say Lee Harris, is that the
Lee Harris? Yeah.
Tell him to come and speak to us next year.
Yeah, I'll try. I'll try and get in. I'll try and get in.
If he's in the UK as well, then surely you can just pop down the road and knock on his door, can't you? Because Jack will tell you we're just a tiny island. So we all live next door to each other. So
I'll send him a text now, just ask him to come for a beer tomorrow.
Same village.
Exactly, yeah, London Village. Yeah. Anyway, Jack, go on. Let's see what you've got in store for us.
Gotcha. Okay, so 2 games off the top of my head for 2026. One of which excited for. Many people have gotten their hands on already. Of course, that is Heroes of Might and Magic Olden Era. Adam and I spent half an episode talking about this as a double feature when we also discussed the previously released Endless Legend 2. We kind of compared and contrasted the games. I mean, that was a first time for me of a Heroes of Might and Magic game. I know they even spent an entire episode, Tim and Adam, talking about it to you, Al. For those of you who didn't watch that episode, and for both of you here that didn't watch the episode because you weren't on it, I enjoyed Heroes of Might and Magic Olden Era. It was a lot of fun. I thought that the game looked quite good. Like I think there was complaints at the time of mobile graphics. I enjoyed it. Adam loved it. He had some complaints and problems, obviously, as like a long time connoisseur of Heroes of Might and Magic, it being very special to him with his culture in Poland and everything as well. But for a first impression, I just enjoyed it. Like I was already on a kick because I had been playing Endless Legend 2 at its early access launch that at that point already. And so having gotten to play Heroes of Might and Magic around the same time, it really put me on this kick for like turn-based fantasy style, similarly like not cartoonish, but I guess just a very fantastic stylized fantasy aesthetic for a world. And so it didn't give me all the same world building and immersion that Endless Legend 2 did, which at this point I'm just repeating our discussion from the episode. But the reason I'm excited for this game in 2026 is because I feel pretty confident that it will come out whether when they've already promised or, around that point. I think it's a pretty complete experience already. I imagine there's going to be future DLCs and updates, but as it stands right now, it seems to be a pretty full product. We only got to play a few tutorial missions initially in the demo that came out for Steam Next Fest, but I had a lot of fun with the game, man. I mean, I thought the turn-based combat was fun. I thought that the siege mechanics were kind of iffy. I really liked the menus though, and the aesthetics of the cities in themselves, like the actual base building mechanics, the way you manage your cities, the way you acquire resources, the way it feels like time passes. It makes you very conscious of a cycle of days in the week in this game. So a lot of fun on my radar.
Played it during Next Fest as well. I actually, in our 2025 episode, it came up, and I said, "Well, Adam, why is this not?" Because I think he had Conquest of EO, the DLC for that, as his favorite game of the year. He says, "Why have you not picked Olden here?" He says, "Because it's not been released yet." And I was like, "Oh shit!" Because of course I played it, and it just didn't. I think it was one of the most played demos across all genres on Steam Next Fest, which is a fantastic achievement for a game of this nature to get such a extensive amount of playtime. But it just didn't work for me. And I think those complaints that you mentioned, it's mobile graphics, and it looked gorgeous. Don't get me wrong, it did, but I could imagine playing that on a phone or on a tablet because I think it's quite simplistic. But maybe I've just scratched the surface, and maybe there's more under the hood, which wasn't in the demo. Because I know, like you said, there was a couple of tutorial missions, and it was fun. It was fun, but so was Boom Beach when I played that in 2006 on my phone. So
Hopefully, they'll rebalance some of the AI stuff for sure for the full release. Because there's been a lot of complaints about the sort of the AI often knowing the entire map without even scouting, and it could calculate your sort of army strength, perfectly, even when you were sort of hidden. And sometimes it also generated resources or units beyond what its town, should have been able to produce. So hopefully those sort of rebalancing issues are worked on, especially on high difficulties. It just, instead of getting smarter, it sort of just got massive resource bonuses. So hopefully those sort of things can get ironed out.
Absolutely, yeah. I don't think I articulated these complaints enough on the actual episode I did where I got to talk about it freely, but I mean, I wasn't a fan of the siege mechanics. I think a big part of that was just I wasn't a fan of the concept, or at least I hadn't understood it by that point. One thing I did praise it for was that I really liked that as tutorial missions, they did the normal strategy thing where it kind of onboarded you, and then it did the best version of a strategy game where it onboarded you just to the point where it stopped holding your hand at all and then let you play the game with all the mechanics that it had taught you. I think in some regards, it didn't teach you enough. And so I feel like the enemies were pretty difficult in the combat. And, you're right. The whole them knowing exactly where resources are, them knowing exactly where you would be on the map, that was frustrating. But moving on to my second game, we probably won't spend much time on this because there's not a whole lot of information about it. there's not a ton of games that have already been announced for next year for strategy. Yeah, well, I guess there has been, but not all of them are on each of our radars. Something that's specific to mine, though, is that there's a new entry in the Stronghold franchise, uh, currently rumored to be titled Stronghold: The Dark Ages. I'm not sure if that's been entirely confirmed yet. Um, Most of the information about this game has come from, I think, actually an official release from Firefly Studios, the developers behind the Stronghold series, and the rumors, the filed trademarks, the community's stalking, essentially. You know, they're the internet's inherent ability to be able to find out anything. So, not a lot to go off of. There's speculation entirely about what the game will be like. There's problems with the previous mainline Stronghold entry in the franchise, but I think they bought a lot of goodwill with two well-received remasters for the first two games.
Is there actually anything known about this game?
I could be entirely wrong and have failed my job to research, but I believe when I was researching it, the official Firefly developer studio has brought up their plans for a new Stronghold game coming out in 2026. Whether or not they've named it the Dark Ages yet, that trademark has been found as of 2024.
Yeah, so it says here April the 8th, and it's still currently under review, so it's probably not going to be the final name, but we'll have to see.
But yeah, that said, not a lot to talk about, but Stronghold 2 was a game that I played a lot when I was much younger. I mean, I grew up playing that game and Age of Empires 2 when it came to strategy games on PC, and I suppose like Age of Mythology. So, I mean, I loved Stronghold 2. I think there's been complaints between Stronghold 1 and 2 about the change of gameplay, problems with the change of aesthetic, like visually, the design between the way the isometric camera works. And now that they've moved over to Unreal for this title, there's some concern about whether or not they'll ditch the 2D, 3D aspect of the gameplay entirely and go full 3D. I would just like a game that leverages the same arcadey gameplay as Stronghold 2, which I know might be more of an unpopular opinion, but that's what I'm looking forward to. All right, so I'm going to move it back to you, Al, since you started us out. You got one more game for us coming out in 2026 you want to talk about?
Yes, and I'm sticking with the theme, and also Sid stole my thunder earlier by mentioning this. How dare you?
Sorry.
It is Total War Warhammer 40k. Tim and I did an episode on this a few weeks ago on the Warhammer announcement, where Creative Assembly announced Medieval 3 one week, and then they announced Warhammer 40k the next week. And I was just like, this is incredible. And it's been one of my most highly sought or highly anticipated games for a number of years. I saw they did Total War Warhammer and then Warhammer 2 and Warhammer 3, and I was like, they have the relationship with Games Workshop. I love Warhammer 40k. I could see them doing this, and I was immensely excited. Continue to be so, but there are some caveats, and there are some kind of issues which I've seen as I've looked at the material that's come out, and they're talking about it already. It's been in development for a few years now, is what they've said. But it's perfect. I love the Total War games, and I love Warhammer 40k. So mashing them together is just it's a match made in heaven, right?
The beautiful, beautiful marriage. It just makes sense. When people, there's heavy rumors going on about Star Wars and, things like that. I said to my mind, well, that sounds cool, but they have Warhammer already. So why can't they complete the, the collection, the saga, as they, so why can't they do 40k? Hopefully with the stuff that I've seen, where you zoom out and you see your star systems and things like that, I'm really hoping for that sense of grand scale. I mean, what did you pick up from that, Al, when you saw that trailer?
We've talked about the potential for Total War Warhammer 40k for a long time on this podcast. I think that one of our first episodes, we talked about the games that we would love to see, and this was one of the games which I brought up. And one of the things that we talked about was the scale, because it's galactic, and how do they capture this galactic scale in a Total War game? But from what I've read and what I've watched and what I've experienced from researching this game and just consuming everything that I can about this title, is that you've got this 4-tier system. So you have your battles, and your battles take place on the planet, and the planet sits inside a flashpoint, a campaign theater, which is the solar system, and then all of these different things all move on to influence the galactic map. So there's not going to be a seamless transition from you're you've got your galactic view and then you go down to a battlefield. There's going to be steps up and down. So you'll have your galaxy, and then you'll have a little campaign that you can do. And one thing Creative Assembly have said, and I really like this idea, and I thought it's really smart of them. They said that there's going to be different kinds of campaigns. So some campaigns will just be a battle. So you zoom straight into system, and there's a key battle to fight, and that's it, finished. So you do it in an hour or whatever. And then there'll be small campaigns which you might do in an evening, and then there'll be the much larger grand campaigns which you could lock yourself away for a weekend to tackle. Some concerns. 4 factions at launch, which is extremely light for a Total War game. Space Marines, Imperial Guard. I'm supposed to call them Astra Militarum, but I've been a fan of 40k since 1989, so I refuse to call them Astra Militarum. So Space Marines, Imperial Guard, Eldar, and Orcs. It's very, very light. It's a very light roster for a Total War game. Especially when the Space Marines and Astra Militarum are the Imperium. So I think that they're kind of going to be on the same side. So really, have you given us 3 different factions to begin with? They've already talked about they want to introduce the other factions to the game. So they've already talked about this is going to be very, very DLC heavy. And we've seen what's happened with Warhammer Fantasy, the amount of DLCs that have come out from that. And some of them have just been a couple of legendary lords or whatever. So looking at this, and there's no Chaos Space Marines at launch, but I was like, well, then you could have Slanesh, Tzeentch, Khorne, Nurgle, Black Legion, Alpha Legion. Before you know it, you've got 10, 15, if not more, specific DLCs just for Chaos. And I think that they're going to have to be careful that they don't overwhelm with the amount of DLCs that they release. So that's something which they've got to be careful of. Another thing, it's going to be releasing 2026, and one of the first 2 games I mentioned was Dawn of War 4. Now, they're going to be in direct competition with each other because they're both strategy games set in the 40k universe, where you get to have squads of Space Marines chopping orcs to pieces. So there's some competition there. Tim, being the eternal optimist that he was like, I think they're going to vibe off each other, and people who play Total War will be introduced to Dawn of War, and people who play Dawn of War will be introduced to Total War because of the crossover of the IP. So that's a concern. But the major thing for me, and I think it's important that I say this, and I will probably shout about this until the cows come home, or at least until the game's released, is fleets. Fleets, if you're talking about a galactic scale, then your ability to engage in naval combat is crucial. And everything points to that not being part of the game. The developers have said your fleets can battle each other, but they haven't said player-controlled flotillas of ships and strike cruisers and battleships facing off against other, facing off in a space battle. And Battlefleet Gothic Armada did this in, I think it was 2009, if not before. So we know that there's a market for 40k RTS space battles. We know the technology exists. Creative Assembly have developed an entire new engine to make this game and to make Warhammer and to make Medieval 3. There's nothing to indicate that there's going to be space battles, and that's my major criticism and my major disappointment.
Yeah, because if they were confident about showing that off. We would have seen that in the trailer, so I'm hoping there are more reveals to be made. I mean, in terms of the launch content stuff, you were saying there's going to be 4 factions or 4 playable races at launch. Don't forget Warhammer, the original Warhammer had the same thing in 2016. It only launched with 4 playable races: the Empire, the Dwarves, the Greenskins, the Vampire Counts,
Which is fair enough, but Warhammer Fantasy is a much smaller setting than the Imperium of Man, which
That's
is
true, yeah.
galactic in its setting. So I can understand the. I think you can justify having a limited roster for Warhammer, and also they'd never released a Warhammer Total War game at that point. So why are they going to pour? Why are they going to pour all of their money into releasing with 12 factions if you can release with 4 just to test the waters and see whether it is going to hold? 40k is a much 40k is a much larger, more popular IP than Warhammer Fantasy. They've proven that the formula works with the 3 Warhammer games. They know that they have a much wider, larger audience with 40k compared to Fantasy. So this seems a bit of a cop-out to only release with 4.
I mean, when I first saw that trailer, I was very excited, even though I'm not overly knowledgeable about Total War or much of a player in the first place. But it's just because, having been a part of the podcast, hearing the wish list from you guys over the past year, I was like, man, what a trailer that delivers. Am I right? Because I didn't parse through every frame, but I absolutely got the implication that there was space combat, or at least actual, like, tangible fleet battles. Especially with the scaling. I mean, I would think that optimistically, the 4 playable factions at launch makes sense, even compared to other Total War games or even the original Warhammer Total War game, because the way you're describing the new engine and the system at which I thought you were building up to explaining how they were going to achieve both fleet combat in space and ground battles, especially with the graphics that we've seen, is that they were just going to have to do like exponentially more math, right? Like they would have to have combined 4 factions at 4 different levels. It'd be like the way you navigate the camera in Stellaris, but if there was 2 additional levels beyond the solar system. Well, I guess there's a planet view, the solar system, the galactic scale, and then if there was a level above that where you were, and each one affected the economy differently. That just seems like entirely different math. But if there's no fleet battles, I feel like that takes a lot out of the equation. And the other thing is, as far as the Dawn of War and Total War 40k competition, I'd be slightly optimistic to suggest that I think Dawn of War 4 is going to just come out in the first half of 2026, and I think that 40k is absolutely just going to release in, like, as far as they can push it through 2026. Because, I mean, when you look at the screenshots, the trailer at the Game Awards, which I thought was excellent, and I'm glad that they announced it there, it looked like when I watched it, it was fantastic, but the gameplay was clearly alpha, even though they were discerning that with subtitles on the video. It felt like I could see where they hadn't done all of their post-production color correction on the game. And when you look at the screenshots on Steam, they look better, but they still say pre-alpha gameplay footage. Dawn of War 4 doesn't state pre-alpha, and also I think the game's just been maybe not in development as long, but I think it's just further ahead. And Dawn of War, historically, they don't really release DLCs, do they? So it feels like it would come out in the first half of the year, and then Total War 40k is going to come out in the last half, maybe the very end of 2026, and then Dawn of War might suffer from having just been a one and done launch, and then Total War 40k might just survive by name and presence through the DLCs.
They have released DLCs for all of the Dawn of War games. The original 3 have all had DLCs. The final one only got 1 DLC, and then they kind of, which I think they probably had planned before they released the game, and then they released the DLC, and then they kind of canned the project at that point because it just wasn't very well received. But Dawn of War, the original Dawn of War, released with 3 factions: Eldar, Space Marines, and Orcs. And by the end of it, I think there was maybe 14 or 15 factions once they released all of the DLCs. So there's huge scope within Dawn of War to release lots of DLCs and to release the factions, but you can kind of forgive them and they're starting with 4 factions for Dawn of War, and it's set on 1 planet, and they're releasing 4 factions for Total War, and it's galactic. So it just kind of boggles my mind a bit that they think this is an acceptable number of factions to launch a game with. They were supposed to be these supposed to be the games we're looking forward to, and all I'm doing is criticizing them. But that's just the critical moves way. You know, we're critical of these things. You know, I'm very, very excited for the game, but I do have reservations, and the limited factions, the lack of fleet battles, the fact that it's going to be their first game that they release on console simultaneously with PC. And the fact it's going to be the first game that they release on a new engine. And the last time they released a new engine with a new game, it was Rome 2, which, as we know, was crushed and burned at launch. There's reasons to be wary, but I am cautiously optimistic. Cautiously optimistic.
Just give me Battlefield Gothic Armada 2, but on a massive scale,
Exactly. Exactly.
Just as long as you can do that with the added, obviously, total warness of the mechanics, but just give us that massive fleet. I want that big war in space, which I would love.
And war in space is Warhammer 40k. You've just described it, and in the lore and in the setting, the fleets are so vital, that they're so important. The ships that the battle barges that the Space Marine chapters use, and the battleships that the Imperial Navy use. They have names. These are ships that have been around for millennia. They have histories. They have personalities. They have entire civilizations living inside them. And I just think that if they don't capture that as part of this, you're dealing with one of the grandest scales in terms of IPs, said in the grandest scale you can get, which is the galaxy, and therefore these fleets should be integral to how that works. And therefore I want to be able to use my ships to blow up your ships, and not just by hitting auto resolve and it being a stats comparison. But I'm still really looking forward to it. Okay.
Well, I think, like you said, Al, we wouldn't really be finding all the flaws in these games if we weren't so excited for them, because we didn't spend this long talking about everything else necessarily. So, speaking of space, Sid, you said before that all of your games were space-based. What is your next one?
Yeah, so my final game is Beyond Astra. You might have seen this around as well if you sort of follow, these sort of games. This will be one that everyone keeps mentioning. It's developed by Nebule Games, actually self-published by Nebule Games, and it will be based on the Unreal Engine, which worries me slightly when games are sort of made in Unreal, since Unreal isn't very sort of known for good optimization, but it's definitely planned for 2026. But then again, with any of these games we mentioned tonight, just take it with a pinch of salt, But this one excites me quite a lot. Why? Because it is 4X, but at the same time, it's a grand strategy. We don't have a lot of good sort of grand strategy space themed games. This one will focus on sort of civilization building, so it'll go into in depth with your civs. The exploration is gonna basically include a lively, again, procedurally generated galaxy. But their main focus for this is to create a living galaxy. So there will be diplomacy, culture, science to think about, religion systems. So in contrast to Falling Frontier and the other game that we talked about here tonight, which I've already forgotten.
Fragile Existence.
Fragile Existence, yes. So in contrast to sort of Falling Frontier and Fragile Existence, this seems to be more of a grand strategy. it's going to be, or someone described it as a personal space opera generator, which I think is kind of cool. But with this game, they're focusing on more the societal simulation, the societal aspect of your civilization. It's going to have real, sort of deep mechanics. It's going to focus on your citizens. Your citizens matter in this game. So it's not just about your fleets, but also the society in which you're building. And I'm excited for this one because it's going to be a complete sandbox with sort of hopefully near infinite possibilities. And it's definitely the most grand strategy leaning of the three games I've mentioned. Which is quite exciting because, again, as I say, there's not a lot of space-based grand strategy. I mean, we always see the 4X types and the RTS types. So this and a couple of others, which I'm sure we'll talk about in future episodes. This has me really excited. Have you guys seen this game at all, Beyond Astra?
Yeah, I have, and I think that I also find it quite fascinating. I'll channel my inner Drexy from Explominate here, and in terms of 4X games and grand strategy, it's very, very difficult to do grand strategy in space because grand strategy is you take over an empire which has a history. It's established. Whereas 4X, you start from scratch and you maybe have one settlement or one planet and you build your empire from there. So I'd be interested to see how they integrate grand strategy elements into a 4X game. Because the obvious comparison for games of this nature is Stellaris, isn't it? Which it wouldn't be Critical Moves if we didn't go an episode without mentioning Stellaris. So that's kind of like the obvious comparison. I mean, we looked at Stellar Reach a few episodes ago, and it was clearly inspired by Stellaris, and it just didn't seem to cut the mustard. Whereas this looks really good. It's been one that I've seen a number of times as I flick through Steam, and it is featured or something which could be interesting. It's actually on my wish list.
Yeah.
So it's one that I'm interested in seeing when it comes out and seeing how it plays, because it does look. I really like the almost abstract way that they do the planets. It almost has like that planetary annihilation look to the planets in terms of they're quite small, so you can almost see the entire planet. And interested to see how that works out. But I do question how you can have I do question how you can have a grand strategy game in space using 4X as a basis. So very, very interesting. Very, very, very keen to see how this works out. It is on my wish list, and it is high on my. It's certainly on my radar.
Again, what worries me about this that there is a lot going on with this again. So I don't know how far into the development they are, but hopefully what they're promising to deliver gets delivered, because it looks very interesting. I mean, you're going to have 3 different genres. It's like a hybrid of 3 different genres. So you've got the RTS battles in space, you've got the city building, planetary city building, you've got the 4X element, then you've got the grand strategy element. So yeah, I mean, I'm really looking forward to seeing more from this title.
I think just to finish on this one, it's the same observation as we had with Fragile Existence. Is there for an indie developer, a small team, are they trying to do too much? Falling Frontier. I've been watching Fallen Frontier since 2023, and It knows what it wants to be, and it's as much as it's been delayed and delayed and delayed. It knows what it wants to be, and it's focusing on delivering what it set out to be. These other two games that they've mentioned, whilst they both sound great on paper, I do have those concerns. Is it a reach to be able to introduce all these different elements from all these different subgenres of strategy games into one singular title? And do they risk, by trying to do too much, do they risk not doing anything particularly well?
Because it will end up, I've seen this kind of thing before, where they fail is a complete imbalance of the mechanics. You're going in the direction of, say, 4X or grand strategy, but at the same time you want to do RTS. So you have to really be careful of these sort of mishmash of different mechanics working together and how they work together.
Yes.
So it will be really interesting to see. I mean, if they pull this off, it could be a complete Stellaris contender.
Let's hope they do. I think it's about time something came along and challenged Stellaris. So, yeah, let's hope they do. But we'll move on to the final game in our 2026 preview. Jack,
Yeah, so my
cue fanfare.
yes. Drum roll, please. We would keep it in space and talk about Star Wars Zero Company, except we're not, because I'm going to stay in character as a Star Wars hater. So I will move on to my actual next game, which is Atre. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce it, but Atre Dominance Wars is a game I am pretty confident will land in 2026 based on everything I've seen. I've only just been clued into this game, didn't know about it before, but it's also a gorgeous looking game. It's probably going to continue to scratch that itch of real-time fantasy-based strategy games. It reminds me a lot already of Endless Legend 2, but even more of the mechanics of Heroes and Might and Magic mixed in. It's also kind of a god game, and I don't think that those things are a list of some of the stuff we've just mentioned for some of the past few games that seem like this overly ambitious thing. I think they're very surgical choices of different parts of those genres that they seem to have brought together for a very specific gameplay vision that maybe I just don't understand yet, but I haven't gotten the impression that it's a mishmash of genres from ambition. I mean, the developers already produced 2 different strategy games in a science fiction setting, being Red Solstice 1 and 2, and so here they are trying to make their pit maneuver into a fantasy world, and it seems like they've taken things from genres they've enjoyed, and then they've kind of like surgically chosen the best pieces of them, which was something I liked about Endless Legend 2 doing to upgrade its existing gameplay from Endless Legend 1, and that's been well received. And so this game looks gorgeous. It looks ambitious. It also looks pretty well done, I would say. I mean, they kind of put their nail in the coffin a little bit by suggesting that the delay into 2026 before their Kickstarter was announced was for content as well as polish and optimization. If they had just been able to say optimization and polish, it would have been like a cherry on top. But of course, they're still in some variation of full content development. So, and they've got to implement everything that they've put as a stretch goal from the Kickstarter that seems to end not so long ago. So it seems like, based on everything I've seen, there's enough of the game to exist that if it had come out in 2026 confidently without any of the additional stretch goals from the Kickstarter, it would probably be pretty cool. So that's just to say I'm pretty excited. I think it looks ambitious. I think it looks gorgeous. I think that I don't know so much about it, but I'm also willing to give it a full try.
Did you try it during the playtest that they had on Steam? It was at the end of November. It was available to play.
No, I became cued into it after that point.
Neither did I, but I was talking to the developer. I was talking to the guy from Ironward about this because it does look really interesting. I covered it on one of our critical news episodes, probably around the beginning of December 2025. Because it absolutely smashed it went on to Kickstarter and absolutely smashed its goal. I'm not sure, can't remember what it ended up as, but they had a $30,000 target for the Kickstarter, and they absolutely obliterated it. So there's clearly a lot of appeal for this title. It did remind me a lot of Heroes of Might and Magic, so that's maybe what kind of made me hesitate in jumping in, because I just don't like Heroes of Might and Magic. I'm sorry to say. But this does look really, really interesting. But I will say I'm bitterly disappointed that you didn't look at Star Wars Zero Company, because that's one which is high on my list of titles for next year.
Well, there's no new information about
for
it
this
is there?
year,
I mean,
because this episode's coming out in 2026, isn't it? So yeah. Okay. No, you're right. There isn't. They announced it in April 2025, and they even said at that point, they said, you will not hear from us for a long time.
yeah, I mean, as the person on the team that's very open about not really consuming Star Wars media at this point anymore, I mean, it was on my list in the first place because I think there's always room for innovation in like the squad-based tactical strategy genre. I mean, I like games like that. I think it bridges the gap between games that I actually have said on an episode before when we talked about what would it take to make a strategy game of the year at the Game Awards. I said it would be a squad-based strategy game, either in a new franchise or in something that people really liked already, which is clearly Star Wars. If you actually even look at the reactions that Star Wars got from the Game Awards in 2025, two games that were like highly asked for the past 20 years, and people have gotten them now. And so I think that that's what Star Wars Zero Company could be, but we didn't get a very lengthy blurb. We haven't gotten an article update at like a 6-month point. We've gotten basically a CG trailer that ends with some gameplay elements that are probably very early alpha. It seems like they've done the same thing that they were trying to do with the almost CRPG, but the third-person action RPG that Casey Hudson is making, that they announced at the Game Awards, which is they probably announced it pretty early into development. I'm actually glad they showed some gameplay at the end of the Zero Company trailer, but like we're not going to see these games for some time. Hopefully, though, clearly it's going to come out in 2026. That's the goal. So I can't wait to hear more. I hope it's a very compelling story and take on the Star Wars universe with all the characters that they promised. But like, I mean, we're still talking about it anyways. But like that's why it wouldn't be on my list. There's nothing else to talk about. We can only sit here and speculate, and I'm not crazy about Star Wars to sit here and suggest like, well, I can't wait to see this or this. It's just like, if I see it and it's impressive, it deserves to be on the roster for like squad-based tactical strategy games.
As long as they give us, more of that XCOM style, gameplay with the Star Wars, I would be totally down for that,
Well, Reactor is X-Firaxis devs, the people who made XCOM. So this has been sold as Star Wars XCOM.
Yeah.
So anyway, there we go. You didn't mention it, so I'm not going to. we actually did a full episode on Zero Company, and if you're watching this on YouTube, it is on your screen now.
All right, so I went over my last one, Atre Dominance Wars. I think it looks really exciting. Thank you, Sid, for joining me today. And you went through a roster of upcoming space games. You highlighted a bunch of clear indies and even games from Hooded Horse, games with, I think, our self-publishing as well. It's pretty exciting. I know we had our reservations because of the not just indies, but indie space of strategy games and how difficult it is to make a game in the first place. So thank you for coming on and kind of rooting for them.
No worries at all. I mean, yes, there's tons. There's 20, 30 more I've got in my list, but obviously there's no time to talk about them. I will do a shameless plug, actually. If you are interested in space strategy games, I run a subreddit called Space 4X, which is dedicated to space strategy games, not just 4X space stuff. So if you want, just check it out there. But otherwise, yeah, looking forward to seeing more from these games in the coming year.
Awesome. And thank you, Al, for joining us. You gave us 2 awesome suggestions as well with your own shameless plug for Sanctuary's Shattered Sun. So, I thought about it after you said that. I was going to change my first 2 answers to be the 2 strategy games I'm working on myself. So I was going to be like, yeah, I'll do that. And then Sid can do his shameless plug. But, thank you for coming on and talking about Sanctuary. Thank you for talking about both of the games that you brought on and then the final game that you suggested. So thanks for joining and rooting for the indies that are more established and that, and also Total War and Dawn of War.
How could we forget? Yeah.
It's always good to be here, mate. It's kind of weird not being the one saying to somebody, thank you for joining us. So it's nice to have somebody else host. So thanks, you've done a good job.
Yeah, you're my favorite guest, Al. Whenever you respond to my emails and I can get you on here. And you don't charge that much either.
Fuck off.
I think he only charged me 25 English pounds, or 25 cheeseburgers.
Yeah, he charged you to be here, I guess. That was your ticket in. But thank you, both of you, for joining me today. Like we said at the start of this episode, if you missed our episode on the games of 2025, Al was on there, and they talked about plenty of games that came out in 2025, but I won't spoil the episode if you missed what we said about it, but go back and watch that as a retrospective, Critical Moves. Played a lot of games, reviewed a lot of games, got access to a bunch of games. We had all of our opinions throughout the year, and we kind of got to summarize them in that episode, so please go watch that. But for those of you who joined us for the look ahead to the games of 2026, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.